Welcome back. I'm Messy number 1.
I'm Messy number 2. This is The Messy Part, a podcast dedicated to the lessons messing up teaches you.
On this episode, we're going to talk about representation in the media.
What are you watching right now? How you've been?
I finished watching Love is Blind, the reunion. It was a DC one. Mm-hmm. And I was underwhelmed by the reunion. I was looking for more drama. I didn't get it.
What kind of drama were you looking for?
I don't know. I just feel like everybody pissed me off the whole season. I was waiting for everybody to get their karma, to get their, to be checked for their behavior. And I just didn't feel like that's what happened.
So I think because they get a lot of online hate, when it comes to the reunion, they're much kinder. And they don't necessarily give people their space to take accountability for their behavior. Like Hannah, she should have been dragged. Nicely, she should have been dragged because she was not being direct by any means. I don't think that's what being direct looks like. And no one was checking her.
Yeah, just her saying, I'm just direct. I can't help that I'm direct. I'm just honest. I'm an honest person. Like, if you have to narrate so much that you're doing that, clearly it's not the impact it's having on people you're talking to. So it didn't make sense to me. And then why they came after Nikki so much, I was like, what is why? I don't know. I didn't understand. Maybe he deserved it. I don't know. But I didn't understand that part at all.
There are a lot of gender dynamics in reunions, I think. For example, people don't necessarily like to come for the women, is what I've noticed. And that it's much easier to call out the man. And there's a lot there.
Out of all the men to call out, I feel like he was not the one to center. I don't know. Yeah, that was.
Do you think the note was bad when he said that he wanted to be the most famous person in Love is Blind?
No, I don't think that was a big deal, and I feel like it was blown out of proportion. Like, I think all of them know that that's part of what happens if you're on the show, or could happen if you're on the show. So even if he wrote that down, he still needed to at least try to find a relationship. So I don't think it was a big deal, personally, but...
I don't think it was a big deal either. I think he was just considering what could happen. It wasn't necessarily something that he was tied to. But I do think that anybody that goes on a reality TV show has that in the back of their mind.
Yeah, you can be famous. If it's your goal or not is...
Especially you're on Netflix. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a 7th season, so you kind of know how this show works. Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know that it's been 7 seasons in 5 years?
Oh, no, I did not know that.
That's pretty intense.
They also have other
They have Love is Blind Habibi.
Really?
Recently. I haven't watched it yet.
There's UK, there's an Argentina one. There's
Mexico.
So many of them. Yeah,
it's a franchise.
Yeah.
It's a franchise.
In 5 years?
In 5 years.
7 seasons. That means they're recording, it has to be at least 2 a year, recording them. Maybe not posting them, but.
Well, they're coming to Boston.
They already recorded, right?
I don't think they've recorded, but they have completed interviews.
I cannot wait.
So we'll see.
I hope we know someone, or we know someone who knows someone who's on the Boston Love is Blind.
Do you think it would make for a better watch?
Yeah, I think that's why I started watching reality TV shows. I started watching Married at First Sight because of the Boston one. I was just curious to see if anybody I know was on it. That was not the case. But it was more fun to watch knowing that they were going places that I recognize. So I was like, oh, I've been there. Or oh, I want to go there. So that's why I watched it. Because otherwise, I was not on the reality TV bandwagon.
I know that's a new development in our lives.
I don't know how I feel about it, but I definitely wasn't there about 2 years ago. I watched none of them. There's so many.
I agree. And all of a sudden, it's just, I've watched a lot of reality TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's okay, though. You just need a break sometimes.
Yeah, the dating ones are funny. I'm just like, wow, people are really out here on the internet being very messy.
And not to compare at all to Insecure, I will say, though, that it does start conversations.
Yeah.
With your friends or your partner. Yeah. And so I like that aspect of it.
I can always pause and be like, would you do that? Do you think that was crazy? That wasn't wild? That was wild? What would you do in that situation?
Exactly. Yeah. It gives you the opportunity to just have some conversations that are brought up from the TV.
I think I was surprised by the DC one. I think I thought it'd be more Black. Just that DC is a chocolate city. It's meant, at least in my experience of being there, I feel like it's such a diverse place. It didn't feel like, to me, the cast didn't match the diversity that I feel like DC has. Maybe I just have a different experience.
I think you're right for the most part. I do think that DC is also very white at the same time. So it just depends on what part of DC that you're in, especially because a lot of the jobs are government jobs. You would find a lot of white people in DC too. So, yeah, I don't know.
I was excited to see it though. I guess, I mean, it was nice to see. I feel like this season had more Black couples than other seasons. There's at least like 3 of them.
That not all of them made it.
Right. Yeah, they don't all make it, you know, but we at least have to see the storylines of them. Whereas I feel like in other seasons it was not as many. Like that
maybe
made it
one
as
or
far.
two.
Yeah.
Or like an interracial couple rather than.
Yeah. This one I feel like had the most. Even if they didn't go all the way, there was still like development and progress to watch.
What did you think about Ashley and Tyler?
I don't really know. Like, I don't understand their relationship. But again, I only know what I see on the internet, so I don't know. But it feels like they have good communication from just, like, the way they interact with each other.
Absolutely.
I just, like, I think I'm trying to trust the reunion and what she said. She was like, I trust that I know what I'm doing and I know what's going on more than the social media does. And I'm like, it's your relationship, so I really hope that's the case for you. But I think the way that the internet found out information about him would blow it up for me, but I'm not in her shoes. I don't know what she knew. I don't know what she didn't know, you know?
I mean, she did say that they were talking about it off camera. Yeah. So there are a lot of conversations that we don't get to see also. So I don't know. I just think that's kind of wild to have 3 kids. Yeah. I couldn't date someone with kids, so that's my
I mean,
my own bias.
In that situation, though, maybe it's a little bit different.
Why?
Because they weren't necessarily his kids. He was like supporting another family have kids. That was at least the story he was telling.
Those were his kids, man. Nobody gonna tell me nothing. I don't care. I'm gonna sit with that one.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. Yeah, I don't know.
You still have children in the ether in the earth walking around.
Yep.
That are half of you at the end of the. I don't know.
Everyone
I don't want to get dragged.
Their situation and they choose how they want to navigate it. Yeah. I just know I could never be on a show like that. Like, I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle any of it. Nope. Couldn't handle talking to somebody on TV. Couldn't handle finding out information later on. Like, none of it.
Yeah. I think it's a last resort, if I'm being honest.
Like to find love?
Yeah. I also wouldn't go there with the expectation that I would find love. I would go there with the expectation that I will learn about myself through the people that I meet.
It's a very, very vulnerable way to learn about yourself on live
right.
TV. With other people watching you learn from your mistakes.
I know, and you can't take back what you said. No. You can't edit it. The editing is out of your hands.
And they will edit it to make it look like however they want it to look. So,
yeah, your narrative is in their hands.
Nope.
Yeah, no, not for me. I
don't have the confidence, I don't think, to survive that experience.
I would be traumatized.
Yep.
From that experience.
I think some people low-key are.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Again, I'm telling you, all the online abuse that they experience is pretty intense.
People have very, very strong opinions that they're like, I'm right and no other thing is possible. I'm like, you still don't know these people in real life. You don't know their experiences.
Have you ever commented on those like Instagram posts?
No, I have never.
About shows or anything when you're asked about your opinion?
No, I read them.
I don't.
No,
although the comments are juicy.
Yeah.
Me though?
No.
I would never.
Like,
I would never. Unless it's like a giveaway.
I'm not adding hate or anything. My thoughts, like.
I just.
No.
I don't know how people.
They don't need my
that.
opinion.
You don't need my opinion.
It's not my life. Good luck with the decisions you're making. Hope you have some good friends around you. Yeah. No, I've never commented. But I do read them. So I'm glad people are commenting because I think it's funny.
I know. That's why I think being online is such a weird thing because you're literally just reading other people's thoughts. At least that's why I go on Twitter mostly. Not necessarily Instagram or anything like that, but definitely on Twitter. I'm like, I'm just sitting here reading people's thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have a Twitter.
It's interesting.
I kind of miss the Twitter train. I've never gotten on.
Yeah.
I don't plan to get on now that I'm not on it.
Yeah.
What's it called now? X?
We don't speak of X.
Word? Okay, just to call Twitter. All right.
I've been on Twitter since I was 13.
Why? What were you talking about at 13? What thoughts were you sharing with the internet at 13?
I was allowed to be online. Let's say that. I was not monitored. in terms of what I was doing
It's
on the
still like
internet.
140 characters. That's still how it works.
But you have to be premium or get verified.
You gotta pay more money
It's
to
fine.
say more stuff.
Yeah.
Nah.
It's fine.
Nah.
But
Nope.
anyway.
Yeah, that's crazy. We talked about Love is Blind. We talked about representation in Love is Blind. What about more broadly? What do you think is like the value representation? Maybe in the media and other spaces.
I have so many complicated feelings.
I love complicated feelings.
About
We're at the messy part.
I know.
We unpack complicated feelings here.
That is what we enjoy doing. Yes. I see the benefits of representation. I think that everyone should be able to see themselves at a certain point in time represented, whether and likely in media or whether it's a job that you want, a profession, you should be able to see yourself. And we know that that historically has not been the case for Black folks and brown folks as well. And so I do think that there is a benefit to that. However, I just feel like we've gotten caught in the concept of representation, that is the end all be all. And I think it gives us a false sense of progress, honestly. And I wish that we were more critical about representation
So you
and
feel
what
like
we actually see.
the progress stops because you see somebody in that position, whatever it may be. You're like, oh, okay, like we made it. Like that. Now we're like, we can stop fighting for this opportunity because someone who looks like me is in it.
Is in it. Okay. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree. I think that I agree with like all of it is that like it's helpful to see people who look like you in places you have not seen yourself in, so you know it's possible. I think to that end, it's really valuable. But I do agree that sometimes we're not critical about who the person is. Like, yes, they look like you, and yes, they like optically cover this like problem of representation. But in terms of experience and in terms of what they'd be doing in the role, like, are they going to keep doing what people who don't look like you were doing in that role? And then what's the benefit of that experience? So I definitely think that sometimes we get caught up in we want someone to have this chance because they look like this, and we don't think about like, but are you, specifically you, a good fit for this position?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
It's what Issa said, right? I'm rooting for everybody Black.
You know, and like for real though, like yeah, like and it's like it's true, right? Like at least for me, like I definitely want that, but I think that sometimes people of color, like when we're in these positions, like it's kind of hard because you want to stay in the role. You don't want it to be taken away from you. But if you're the first in that role, there's a lot of pressure to do it well or to do it correctly or to like kind of give up some of your values to stay in the position that you're in. So it's a really tricky position to be in, and everyone's looking at you on every side to see if you like mess up or not.
And the expectation is higher, and
Yeah.
the pressure is higher as well. That's why I remember a mentor of mine told me, like, you shouldn't glorify being the first of something. And I'll never not think about that, because oftentimes we say, oh, I want to be the first in my family to do this. I want to get this degree, or I want to have this particular profession. And we don't realize the kind of sacrifices that someone has to make. And oftentimes you do have to battle your own integrity in these spaces. Yeah. If you're choosing not to uphold the status quo, you're being looked at in every type of way, sideways, and even by people who also look like you, who may not think that you deserve to be in that position either.
Yeah.
And who are sometimes also more critical of you and expect more from you. I remember, and I'm also guilty of this, like when I had Black professors in college in particularly, I remember them telling me that we're harder on them.
Yeah,
because we expect more from them.
Yeah.
And we expect them to be our friends.
Yeah.
Because they look like us. And they're
and
not.
You also expect more like leniency from them. You expect more like, yeah, a lot of things that you wouldn't expect from somebody else who doesn't look like you in the same position.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about like how messed up that it is that I'm looking at them that way. I had never thought about the fact that I ask more of them just because they look like me and my friends.
Yeah. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that part of why representation matters is the experience that, like, you know my experience better than the person before you.
Or you think that they know your experience.
Right, but I guess, like, that they have a more range of expertise in that, like, people have varied experiences, right? Yeah. Like, maybe not your particular experience, but ideally the idea, like, the role is, like, if you're in this position, you can accommodate for like a different kind of person. You can accommodate for people who maybe had a similar past to the person that you are, or you're asking different questions. Like the hope is that you are able to do it differently. That is, I think, the baseline expectation people are having when they see someone who looks like them somewhere else. Like, oh, like you're not going to do what the person before you did to kind of block access to the space. You're going to like help me get access. I think is an assumption. I don't know if it's a good assumption or a bad assumption, but that's definitely the assumption that's there.
It's definitely the assumption and the expectation. And oftentimes they're just trying to survive when they get into a particular position. I think about, I hate to talk about it, but what happened to Claudine Gay? Let's not say that, we agree with her politics or anything like that, but I do think that there was a lot of pressure put on her, whereas her predecessors did not have that same experience.
Yeah. No one even asked any questions of them. They were just kind of like slotted right into the same roles that they've been having for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why I'm always cautious around representation. And I no longer see it as something that I am striving for. I'm grateful to live in an age where we do get to see ourselves represented in the media, because I remember being young and being like, I remember vividly watching TV and just looking like, no one looks like me. And no one was talking about that and why that was the case. And I believe that in the last 5 to 10 years, that has changed drastically. And so I'm grateful for that. And also, I think part of it is that we can't expect people to be perfect. And oftentimes when they're representing us, we sometimes want them to be. And we don't treat them as just a human who is able to fuck up. That's maybe why I like reality TV shows. If we're thinking about it from that perspective, that you just see people mess up all the time. And we don't expect them to be perfect. We expect them to be messy. And I don't know if you're really afforded that in other spaces as much.
Yeah, I think I agree. I feel like I've been offered like roles or jobs in places where like I would have been the first, or like I would have been the person in like a DI position, right? Yeah. And for me, I think I was always skeptical of being a person of color whose like authority is in a DI role, because I'm just like, why? Like, what about... Like for me, in my head, maybe this is just my like trauma speaking for me, is like my assumption is that whatever happens, good or bad, is going to be somehow my responsibility.
Oh, that's not your assumption. That's reality.
And if it's going to go well, then I'm like, oh yeah, we hired a person of color. Obviously, like they're doing DEI, perfectly. And if it doesn't go well for whatever reason, then well, like look who we hired to like take it up with her almost. So for me, I'm like, I'm always wary when I'm offered DEI like based positions, because I'm just like, what is the underlying reason for why I'm being offered this position versus somebody else who has like similar expertise to me? It feels like it's way more about optics than they think that I'm actually a good fit for the role.
You always have to question if they want to hire you for you or for what you look like and who you are. And
I don't know how to be sure on either side, right? Like maybe that is just the next step for me career-wise, and that's great, and I do that kind of work, so I don't mind it. But on the other hand, like maybe it really is just because you want to make sure that you kind of have your ducks in a row if anything was to kind of come up from situations.
Well, I'll even take it a step back from just being in a career. I remember when I was applying to college and they would give us these pamphlets and it was so diverse. And I was quote unquote excited because it was a diverse community. And then you get there and it's just 10 of y'all. It's just 10 of us in class.
But you all were in the pamphlet.
Of course, we were in the pamphlet. I ended up being in the graduation pictures on the Holy Cross website. And I just felt used.
Did you get a salary for that?
No, of course I didn't get a salary for it. And y'all just using my face. And because you're trying to send this message that you have diverse students. Right. The whole, right, there's a lot already there. And you're sending a wrong message at the end of the day because it's not accurate to what is happening. And also you're not supporting the students truthfully.
You're doing the labor of what it means to be diverse. Like if that's what you're promoting, like where's your action?
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes it's just about optics and it's not about the work. And that's really why I have so many mixed feelings about representation, because it is just putting, a black face in a high place. And we did it. My hands are cleaned, and there's no point in that anymore.
Yeah. I think on the flip side of this conversation, the representation that I feel like has helped me is like in the creative space. Like I've really enjoyed how the range of people of color and other identities that are represented in like podcasts, movies, like art, just like in different roles, I feel like that feels more genuine because it's like it's a thing. It's not just like a position you have or a role you have. Like you're doing something, you're making a space, you're creating art. So I've appreciated that. I think it's helped me remember that like, oh yeah, I can kind of create things out of thin air because I'm seeing people who look like me, who have similar backgrounds to me, do it. That part I've liked. That's also, I think, representation too. It's not necessarily like a role you're given or a title you're given, but just creating space and like creating different kinds of art, makes way for other art.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that you need to be able to see someone do something for you to do it?
I don't know if I need to see someone do something for me to feel like I can do it. I think sometimes my imagination isn't as wide as I would like it to be.
Ooh.
I think more. I don't think it's that like, oh, she did it, so I can. That actually doesn't motivate me. If anything, I'm like, that feels like mad work. Like they're doing it. But I think that it's helpful to see things that you can imagine for yourself, because I think that just widens the like how much you can try. So I don't know if I have to see something, but it does help me to understand that people are making things out of thin air and creating like these grandiose things. Like that's really helpful because I'm like, oh, like I have ideas that are that big. I didn't know that people who are like my age, people who look like me, like who have this much money, whatever it may be, like are able to dream this big. That helps.
So it's empowering.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's like I can't do it if I've never seen it, because like everything that exists once didn't, so I can grapple with the fact that I can create things that don't exist, but it makes it easier to think about it or to plan or work towards doing it, having seen someone's effort manifest in something bigger or similar to what I would like to create.
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah,
I would absolutely agree. It gives you perspective on what is possible. That's how I see it. Versus you might not have known that was possible until you saw it firsthand. And I think it also makes a difference for me if it's someone that I know doing something that I am so shocked by versus someone who may grew up with more resources than me and things of that nature. So I do think it makes a difference for me who the person is that's doing the thing, because we don't all have the same access.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this podcast, I feel like we talked about it for a long time, right? We're like, oh, it'd be so cool if XYZ, XYZ. And then at some point we just took a step in one direction. So sometimes I think seeing people's final result can also be disempowering, because it's hard to see the like baby steps that took them to that place. So I think it helps to know people who are like working to create things, or people who are putting like energy and like time towards the things they're trying to create. So seeing that feels more helpful to me than big picture sometimes, depending on the goal or the dream.
Yeah. And I also think that there are things that we might not have known were possible. Mm-hmm. Like there are certain roles that exist that I just would never in my thought process ever come across had I not met someone. And so I do think it widens our perspective, like you said.
Yeah. Thinking about like that part, what do you think is the value or the positive side of being the first in something?
I think you're a way shower, that you are able to show other people how to do something. You're a leader in that perspective. I do think it's a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people who struggle with that. I think about it as being like an older sibling, not me, but knowing older siblings who struggle with different aspects of being a human, and they show their younger siblings just how to do things, how to navigate situations. And so the benefit is that you get to do something first. Mm-hmm. And that's a certain joy that, I don't know, like you don't ever experience again. And you get to figure things out as hard as it may be. But once you have an idea, you can show other people, and other people can learn from you. And you can tell people, you don't do this, or this is the best way to do something. And so I think that's the benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me, I would add that part of, because being the first doesn't mean that no one else has ever done it. Maybe you're the first who looks like you, right? There's a lot of other places where maybe you aren't the first. Mm-hmm. But I think that you can create access, right? So let's say like I'm in this new leadership position and I know that this is not my skill set, whatever the part may be. Like I now hopefully have room and power to like elevate other people into a similar like, horizontal role to mine, right? So I think part of being first also means doing things differently, to your point, and that being the standard. Where if you're not first, you're like kind of fighting for that change. But if you're in that position, like you kind of hopefully can create some more permanent like ways of operating that create revolving doors for folks to come in and like elevate themselves also.
I love that you said that because I do think that you set the standard for what is possible. And oftentimes, you know, the downside of working with someone else's imagination is that they're showing you a particular way of doing something. And sometimes we don't necessarily trust ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I often think, even if someone does something that I want to do, I am a different person. And so I have to trust that I'm going to do it differently in one way or another. Yeah. It may reach the same result, but the process will look absolutely different for me. And the learnings may be completely different. And so I do think it's important to recognize that even if there are people who are doing things that you want to do, you are a unique individual. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're going to decide, you know, what art piece looks like this and how to combine different things together. And I also think there's a beauty in that we often forget.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now dangers. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but besides the pressure and the fact that like everyone's kind of looking at you to mess up, like what do you feel like are the other potential like I guess cons of being first in something?
I will speak for myself that I struggle with the unknown.
Okay.
And so being a first in something, you're just dealing with a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
Everything that gets thrown at you, you have to figure out. You have to be an expert problem solver, in my opinion.
In real time.
In real time. Yeah. And that may feel very lonely because you can't turn to someone else and say, like, how did you do this? All you have is yourself in a lot of ways, and that could be really disheartening.
Mm-hmm. Or if you're the kind of person who decides that your way is the only way, right? That also I think is maybe a downside of being the first, is like you are setting a standard, right? So if you set the standard to be, I make all decisions and no one else's opinion is like heard, that could be what you decide, right? Like that's still, you have the power to do that also. So I think that it comes with a lot of power. And how that power is used, I think, really changes the direction of whatever's happening. But both sides, I think, are very, very much possible. I think we've both seen both sides happen.
Absolutely. I mean, day in and day out, yeah. I see the benefits and I see the drawbacks. And I don't think it's a kind of thing that's clean cut anyway.
No.
It's such a vast thing that we're talking about, especially depending on where you're looking at representation. So there's no easy answer. And I think that regardless, we're talking about human beings. And people are going to fail. People are going to do things differently than us. And we may not always agree with them. And I also think that that's okay. Because we can't expect everyone to be like us. That's also a downside.
Yeah.
And it's not representation.
Exactly. You're doing a cookie cutter. It's opposite. Mm-hmm. All right. I have more questions for you. You ready?
Sure.
Amazing. So thinking about representation, what do you feel like you have seen in your life that has like giving you like inspiration to kind of be where you're at? Like what representation have you witnessed growing up to kind of put you on this path that you're on? Does that make sense?
I mean, I think it makes sense. Do I think it's a hard question? Yes.
Of course. I mean, I don't know how to ask you.
Do I necessarily know? I don't think so.
That's okay.
I don't think so.
Do you feel like you've seen things, or do you feel like you kind of just have been stumbling along the way?
Your girl been falling. Stumbling is a good word. Well, I think it's just the opposite of that. I don't know if I ever mentioned this in the podcast, but the reason why I studied philosophy was because it was me and all white men. And so I did it out of a sense of
like a lack of representation.
A lack of representation. Mm-hmm. And to say that I can think too.
Yeah.
And in some ways it has, I wouldn't say that it's worked against me, but that it has been a motivator to not see myself in certain spaces.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the experiences that I think back to is when I wasn't represented in a particular place and I wanted to be, and I thought that I should be, and I thought that my people should be. And I think a lot about the curriculum that I learned when I was younger and not being represented in the classroom, like taking history and only learning about European history, and then looking around, it was just all black and brown kids. Like, where we at?
Right.
What happened to our people? What y'all did? I want to know about you. Seriously though, this is me in 7th grade.
I mean, that's a crazy way to be in 7th grade, but good for you.
I was just so shocked.
Yeah.
And I think it also may have to do with the fact that this wasn't always my reality. I did grow up around people for a very long time that they all did look like me. And so to be in spaces where that wasn't the case, it didn't make sense.
That makes sense. So the lack of representation actually empowered you.
It was definitely a fuel.
Instead of disempowered you. Because it could have been like, well, they're not here, so therefore it's not possible for me. That could have been a similar narrative that you just kind of adopted, right?
I think it depends when in time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. But I'm glad that it was empowering instead of disempowering.
Yeah, but I think now it's something that I'm unlearning, actually.
You're unlearning that.
I'm unlearning that I don't have to be the first in the room. That actually doesn't have to be a fuel for me to have a certain level of representation to show other people that this is possible for them. It's not a motivating factor for me anymore. And it's hard. It's hard.
So what is it now?
There are certain things that I want to do, and I want to do them.
Amazing. I love that. No,
I don't know how that sounds.
Nice and simple. Good. Yeah.
I think that I am trying to dissolve myself from responsibility. However that may be received.
You're responsible to yourself.
I'm responsible to myself. I'm responsible to my communities. And I think outside of that, I'm good. Someone a few days ago, I was listening to this conversation, and she said, I want my life to be an offering for my ancestors. And I resonated so much with that. And that's really all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that anything that I do reverberates 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And that's really where I'm at. It's not necessarily about achieving a certain status or obtaining a certain degree or doing something just because other people were doing it, or because at a certain point in time I thought I couldn't do it. I just want to live my life on my own terms. And I think that in itself is a privilege.
Makes sense. I have more questions.
I wanted more thoughts, less questions.
Well, what do you think? Follow up, because I guess do you think that people who are in these positions are like representation, like people who are seen as representatives of something, like that was what they were working towards? They just, because it feels a little more like people who watch people in those spaces call them that versus like that. I don't know if that's like anyone's like motivating factor when they're doing something. I think it's more like what you're saying now, that like you want to do these things for yourself, and because you'll get there, someone else might see that as, see, look, like this person made it, so now I can. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that like I can't figure out if people who are in those positions are there because they were trying to be the first versus just like trying to do the thing anyway, and then they kind of just happened to be that they were the first versus like that being their goal.
I think it depends on the person. I do think that there are some people who may feel who that may be a motivating factor for that being the first. And there are other people who genuinely have a goal in mind and that's what they want to do. And I do think it is a lot about how other people are perceiving that person, not necessarily what that person is trying to do, because we may not always know. Yeah. Or unless they tell us. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes we put that label on a particular person. And we've talked about this too, but in 2024, when people, when there's a headline and it says the first to do this and that, and just how underwhelming it is at this point to see that. Late.
Like, it's 2024. Like,
it's 2024. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. There aren't more of us, really?
Like, why are we celebrating that? And I have mixed feelings about it. Genuinely, because I do want to celebrate people doing something for the first time, and I'm really critical. The bar is so low. The bar is in hell.
Yeah, the bar is in hell.
So what do you think that it is other people putting that idea on a person?
I think so. I mean, to your point, I can't ever I can't know, but I feel like a lot of people, I think about even myself, like I don't think that motivates me to do something. I want access to that space. I want to break this glass ceiling because I think that there's like change on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. If that also means that I'm the first in that space, then that's also true. But I don't think for me like that is enough of motivation, because to your point, like it's so late. Like, why is this not already a reality? Why is it taking this long? So I don't know, but I would like to speculate that a lot of people who are the first of these things have been working their whole life to do the thing, whatever the thing was,
and they just so happen to be the first.
So like it makes sense that the story that's pulled out of it is not the like lifelong journey of the process of getting there,
of course,
but the fact that they made it, right? Because like we are in a society that really values like end results and outcomes and what you did in finishing a race and those things, but we don't spend any time on the like, here are all the ways the person was committed to this dream of theirs since they were a kid, right? Like, I don't know, any of the first astronauts, whatever, whoever they may be, they didn't just get there. They spent their entire life working towards one day getting to do this thing. So yes, they were the first, but their entire life was dedicated to like, doing this thing that they like also found valuable for themselves
and genuinely wanted to
do.
Yeah.
So I don't think that like, because everything people are doing for the first time is hard. They're not easy things that you just kind of wake up and do tomorrow, right? So I feel like there has to be a deeper commitment to doing whatever it is. And I think that part of the way that we represent those people and talk about them kind of devalues their dream, right? To be like, they're the first, like that's actually like, that's almost like a sideline story, right? Like this person in their life, like committed their, whatever they're doing to this goal and they achieved the goal. Not to be the first. Unfortunately, they were just first, to do the thing, right? Like, so I think our story of those people, and like it's inspiring and it's really helpful to know that people are doing all these things that create access. And I appreciate having the stories that exist, but I don't know if it matters to me specifically that they were the first or second or third. Like that doesn't. I don't think that changes where it lives in my brain. I'm not like, oh, they were the first, now I can. I'm just like, oh, somebody did this. Oh, I can too. It could have been the 64th person. Like, I don't know. So I don't know if the number is like significant to me, but I know that it matters. I know that the first is important.
So have you seen the Simone Biles documentary?
In part.
Okay, so this is a really interesting concept because Simone Biles has been able to do things in gymnastics that other people have not been able to achieve. That now they're calling certain things like the Simone Biles 1, the Simone Biles 2. And now because she's done it and other people have seen it, they are doing it. And so it's not to say that she is the first to do this, but oftentimes it's what you were saying about imagination. That it is more possible for us to believe that this is real if someone else has already done it first. And we can also be that person for other people.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's an important way.
Both are true, right?
Both are true.
Yeah, I think that there is, like, I know as a teacher, I mean, I guess I'm not a teacher anymore.
You're a teacher. We're not.
I think that I know how valuable it is for kids to see me in classrooms. I know that. Like, no matter how I feel about it, like I know that it changes their experience of school to have a person who looks like me in front of them. I'm not the first or anything like that, right? But it literally changes. Like, I think even for me in high school, I think I had one black teacher. Yeah. And in college, I had maybe 2. And like,
it could change the trajectory of your life, right? Also,
so like I know they expect more. I knew that walking in, I knew that like because I was a black teacher, I was also a woman. Like I knew that I was going to end up playing more of a role in these kids' lives than just. I knew that, right? So that was something I walked in fully aware that I was like almost like buying into, and I know how valuable that relationship is at that age for whatever reason, like at that time period for those kids. I know that. So I think like representation is always going to have a really significant amount of transforming experience for whoever is a part of it. Like it for them, it's like the difference between going to college and not, right? Like, or even considering that they would even have the opportunity to do it, or they're worthy of it, or whatever those things may be. I know how valuable it is. So there is, even just like in like just seeing someone who looks like you, there's a lot of importance there that'll never go away. But I do agree with you that I think that like celebrating first feels sad, like especially when the first things aren't new things. It makes sense for Simone Biles, like that's the thing that no one's ever done before. Yeah, she's not the first black person to do this. She's the first person to do this. It's different, right? Like you're setting the bar for something. But the things that are like first woman of color to be able to edit this paper, it's like, you know what I mean? I'm like, the paper's been edited for years. Like, why weren't they letting black women edit papers? Like, we all know how to read. I don't know. Like those things I think are really frustrating because I'm like, the issue was never about the brilliance of these people or their ability to do this. It's
about access.
And it took this long for them to get for some racist person to like leave or whatever for that to like, so we're celebrating. something really confusing. It's not them. We're not celebrating the person, you know, because the number right there just immediately brings it back to system. We're not celebrating like, you know, something that like is significant for their life experience. We're celebrating that this law changed, or like we have a less racist policy, or I don't know. That's how I think about it.
No, I would agree. And so similar to the question that you asked me, were there certain things that you saw growing up that affected what you thought was possible for you, or what you could do?
Oh, yeah.
Or even people?
Yeah, definitely people. I think I think from like a really young age, I feel like the career paths available to me within my gender were like very much like creative writing, like English. Like, I don't know if it was like told to me directly, but I feel like
creative writing is so
or just like,
specific.
but I'm
English,
saying like something that's just like a little more like conversational than like math and science. I feel like it's how I was like
100%.
how I was like socialized, right? Like, I don't know, I could be a mathematician, but now I know I can't now, but I could have been. So I feel like a lot of things that I saw put me in a box of just like, oh, like this is like, you know, and like I bought into it, I guess, unknowingly, and I don't mind that I like those things. I don't dislike them, but
again, you were socialized.
Yeah,
there's a certain
so it kind of just
level
like happened like in my life.
Part of it is not your choosing.
Yeah. And like I feel like I wasn't good at these things, but maybe I would have been if I like, I don't know, put more energy towards them, but I didn't. So that was definitely a part of it, but that wasn't necessarily representation. I don't think I ever had like, all of my math teachers were men, which that shouldn't have meant that I couldn't have. I don't know. That couldn't have meant that I couldn't have done more there, but it just didn't feel like it was for me. I don't know. So that's one way. I think similar to you, like lack of representation was motivating, not because I wanted to be the first or to be a part of it, but because I was like why is this empty? Like why is there nothing here? So for me, I was like, I just want to understand why it's empty, and then maybe it makes sense why it's empty and I'll leave it alone. But whenever I would investigate why it was empty, I found racism.
Of course.
So I was like,
we always find racism.
I was like, oh, it's empty because like, oh, okay. So then, you know, that motivated me to kind of understand it more. And I think the older I got and the more I got into education spaces, I realized how much kids listen to things I say and how much they absorb my like mannerisms and habits. So I became very quickly aware that how I talk and how I speak and how I'm in classroom spaces matters. So I was like, oh, these kids are like copying what I say almost verbatim to each other. So I was like, I need to be really careful that I'm like being positive, that I'm like not saying negative things about myself, or like that I'm not like always frustrated or like stressed around them, because I'm watching them almost like pick up these habits so quickly. So I think that I realized that representation happens on an interpersonal level in my life more than like this person I've never met before who's like doing this thing I want. Like I noticed that it happened very much just like in my relationships, like with students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I realized that I was like, you're listening to what I'm doing. Like, you're like, oh, okay. I was like, wow, I need to be careful.
Yeah. I was a peer mentor when I was in high school. Tell me why. And then I also was a mentor to my peers, to like when I was a junior to 10th graders and 9th graders. And then when I was a senior in college to first year students.
I love that. That's
and
cute.
That is a form of representation.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that it happens at the interpersonal level, because I think that that's really where it matters too. And that, for example, when I was in college and I was talking to, you know, women of color who were just getting into college and like telling them about my experience, and I could also listen and hear that they were taking in what I was telling them. And so how I showed up mattered, and what I was doing mattered. Just what they thought, you know, what clubs they could be a part of, and what they could do in college, and even the majors that they decided to sort of take on. And so I have seen the benefits of representation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really beautiful thing when it also happens peer-to-peer level as well. Because, and I've always said this, I look to my peers to know what's possible for me. And I look to them as my networkers and as my friends and as the creatives. And they're the ones that are my teachers. It's not necessarily someone who's in this sort of faraway place that I could never touch, because I think that oftentimes it's just there's too many gaps.
Yeah. And you can't, the story is unclear from like where you are to where they are. But I think I'd be curious to ask like little kids, because I feel like a lot of them, like they see like Serena Williams. They see like these bigger people, and they're like, wow, like I could be a tennis player. So I'm curious if this answer changes based on like how old you are, because I think for them, people like actors and actresses and those people like really help them expand or widen their like world. But I wonder if over time they look for that same affirmation closer. But I think for like if you're young, I think that like it's okay if it's really far away because you're young. So you're like, okay, like when I'm older, like I can do this. I can like work towards being Simone Biles, right? Like I think it's really inspiring. But I think the older you get, the more context you have, I think you look for that same affirmation and the same inspiration a little bit closer to your like reality. But I don't know. I'd be curious to ask little kids what they think.
I think that's fair. And I mean, I've certainly have seen that when I'm in conversation with little kids, right? Even how they decide to dress up for Halloween, or just what they think they can do is based on something that they see. And that's why, like, outside of representation, when I think about TV and I think about film and anything that we see, we're living in different people's universes.
Yeah.
And we're being allowed to step into that universe and see what happens there and see how people react and how people function and observe them. That's really what's happening when we're watching TV, like to take it to a very meta level.
Yeah, no, for real.
That's what's happening. And so that's why it's hard for me to always do it without being critical.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. I think that's kind of why I can't really watch TV anymore. I'm like, there's too many, like, it's too deep. It's not deep, but for me, I'm like, there's too many layers that I feel like I look into. So I appreciate the shows that have very little layers. I'm like, yes, one layer. Let's do that. It's like, it's easy to follow. Yeah, then that's it. Like, we'll all leave the situation. There's no deep reading into it. No preference. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The game of representation for yourself, I think even for me, I've been trying to answer this question. If you were like a representative for anything, what do you hope it's for? Because people look at, and whether or not you're trying to be representative or not, like people in your life, whether they are close to you or far away from you, are looking at you for something.
Oh my God.
What do you feel like it is, I guess? Or maybe like what do you hope it is?
This brings me so much joy. So my little cousin, she's 10, and a few months ago for her birthday, when I was hanging out with her, she associates walking with me.
I love
and
that.
And she associates breathing with me. And I almost started crying because I was like, wow, okay, like, damn, that really is my brand.
Your philosophy is like landing
for her. And every time that I hang out with her, she asks me if she wants to go on a walk, like if we can go on a walk. And that's our activity.
I love that.
And so honestly, if that is all I've ever done in life, I'm good. I'm solid. I'm so solid. So it was really beautiful to hear her say that and to associate those things with me that I think are beneficial to her long term.
Yeah.
Regardless of me, that she'll have those activities. Yeah. What about for you?
I think what I hope people are taking away, or I hope that people see me as, is somebody who centers like curiosity, that they can also practice centering curiosity in the spaces they are in. I hope that I represent, I mean, we just talked about this, represent questions, right? I think I'm pretty inquisitive, and I think that people walk away and use me as a reference for engaging in their conversations from a different perspective that is not always like argumentative, or like just like more just like curious, like, hey, like this happened, like why do you think this happened, and that approach. So I hope that's what I represent to people.
Well, I can tell you how I read you.
Oh my God, please. How do you read me? How do you read me?
I do think that you are someone that is able to look at a situation from multiple perspectives, and that you're able to pause, and that you do ask really good questions. And your questions are open-ended. I think that's the difference. And I do think that that's a skill that is built.
Yes, it is
over time. And that it requires active listening also to what the other person is saying, because I do think that you're able to dissect what's happening underneath what the person is actually saying. So there's been many times where you're like, yeah, I know that could feel like shame. And I'm like, shame? Who says shame? No one says shame. Me, shame?
And then what happens? And
then I recognize that, oh, wow, yeah, I guess what I am describing is shame. And so I think that that's how you are perceived by other people too, or at least in my own experience, that you are able to figure out what people are actually getting to, even if they're not saying the words that they think they are.
Yeah. Yes, I'm so glad. That is my goal. That is my brand. So I'm glad that my brand is landing.
Yeah. And I do feel like that the podcast in itself is our ability or our chance to help people ask better questions so that they can also build deeper connections with the people that they're around, and they can also build a deeper connection with themselves.
Yeah.
And so I guess with that being said, like, what are you hoping our listeners, our viewers are taking away from this conversation around representation?
One that clearly is very nuanced.
Very messy.
There are a lot of layers. There's no right or wrong answer. I hope that they're taking away that it's okay if you are the first, and that it's also okay if you're not the first, and that it's really, really helpful if you are in those positions to consult your community. You know, that you don't have to be the first by yourself. You can be the first with support and help and counsel. You know, so ask your friends for help. Is hope the takeaway.
I mean, we reject individualism.
You know what I mean? Like, deeply, like, for real. Like, nothing is an independent task. Like, you trying to go do an errand? I'm trying to come with you.
You know what you said to me the other day that I really just had to take a pause and, like, look at myself? You said just because you did something wrong and it's your fault doesn't mean that you have to solve it by yourself. This was at, like, 10 a.m. on a Thursday. And I was like, damn, Linda's really my teacher.
Like, why you gotta punish yourself? That was a crazy conversation. I was like, why did you suffer? Because you made a mistake?
But you don't understand how liberating it was to hear you say that. That just because I did something wrong does not mean that I have to shoulder it myself. That was such an unlearning moment for me. Do you understand? Like, I grew up, like, if you fuck up, you fix it. It is your responsibility. And that's punishment speaking. And you saying that to me gave me room.
I love
to reach out to other people and ask for help. Genuinely.
I'm so glad. Good. We're learning in real life here, okay? We're doing some unlearning for real.
Every day, all day.
I love that. Yeah,
24,
yeah,
8.
Don't punish yourself. Be nice to yourself, please.
You know, I think that's life's work.
It really is.
It's unlearning all the ways that we've learned to punish. So,
what do you hope our listeners take away?
I hope that the listeners take away everything that you already said, that there is beauty in being the first. And there is beauty in creating a space that you can open for other people, and other people can see you as a mentor, as a comrade, as someone who they can trust that is in a particular role, and they see themselves in you. I think that's actually really beautiful, and we shouldn't take away from that. And to always be critical when we are put in certain positions, and to question other people's motives. Genuinely, I'm always going to be a skeptic.
I think that's okay.
I'll die a skeptic.
You should. You live in America and it's capitalistic.
And to your point, to look underneath to see what's actually happening that may not be front and center for us. Yeah.
I like that.
And what are you taking away?
I don't think I thought about how even if you don't want to be a representative, you are simply because you exist. I don't think I internalize that until today or until this conversation. So that means that, standing on your integrity, like, always, which I think I try to do in general, but not because of this point, I guess, but making sure that because you are representative, you represent your values, yourself, your community, whatever that may be, wherever you travel, that you are really just checking your alignment for yourself, right? Not for anybody else, but that when you are in those positions where you are given a role, everything else you've been working on kind of just continue. You can keep doing it instead of having to now pivot because you are in the spotlight. So checking your alignment, I think, is my takeaway.
Oh, and that's a constant task. Yeah, I would say that for me is to release the idea of being perfect. Because in any room that you're in, and you said this last time, it really depends who else is in the room and how they're looking at you. And I really want us to mess up more. and allow ourselves the ability to show up in our values, in our integrity, and know that we may make mistakes and that we don't have to handle it on our own. Yeah,
love
that feels
feels
that
nice
feels good. It
and
feels a
warm.
little like,
I like
a
that.
balm
Yeah.
on our little hearts that are so tense all the time because the world sucks. And I really hope that other people are having these conversations in their particular communities, and that's always my hope.
Yeah. At least listening to ours. You know, if they're not happy.
And disagree with me. Shit,
Yeah,
call
if
me
you got
out,
opinions,
call me in.
let us know.
Yeah, exactly. Always, I'm never afraid to have a different opinion than other people.
I can change my mind. You might be right.
I change my mind constantly, in fact.
Really
I
often.
It is. Yes. I'm just going to bow my head for a second. Yep. I think it's great. And I think it's really difficult.
Makes
And
for
that is
interesting
life.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that is life. All right.
And that wraps up episode 2. Thanks for joining.
You saw me smiling. I was
See you later. Bye.